All right. So most of what this talk comes from is from Chögyam Trungpa's book, Shambhala, The Sacred Path of the Warrior. And the reason for that is I only had until since last Monday, Monday to come up with a talk for today. And typically when that happens, I go with whatever I'm reading. So whatever I'm reading, right, that's what's top of mind. That's what I'm thinking.
Gotta go quick in the house.
And Zach and I,
Oh, I'm sorry.
Zach and I facilitate the Monday night entering the path class. And this is the book we've been using there. And we've actually really enjoyed it. So I'm going to start with what I'm going to do is I'm going to provide some narrative and then some quotes from Trungpa regarding this concept of a spiritual warrior. And then I'm going to ask questions, and I'm going to ask all of you to chime in with your own interpretations or understanding on what it means to be a spiritual warrior. So it starts, the Shambhala teachings are founded on the premise that there is a basic human wisdom that can help solve the world's problems. This wisdom does not belong to any one culture or religion, nor does it come from the West or the East. Rather, it is a tradition of human warriorship that has existed in many cultures at many times throughout history. Interesting. In this talk, I want to explore what Trungpa calls the sun rising in the east, or the great eastern sun, and along with it, the rising of this concept of a spiritual warrior. The great eastern sun, in his description, encourages wakefulness, dignity, confidence, which allows the spiritual warrior to work with the challenges of the world without succumbing to them. So that's the great eastern sun rising. We'll get to the western sun in a little bit. I found that in creating this talk, or even when Zach and I were teaching from this book, that Buddhists are really uncomfortable with this idea of the metaphor of a warrior for the purposes of talking about spirituality. Do you feel that same way, that kind of discomfort? Some people say no.
They always use the term conquer. So when I first saw that, I went, "Oh, it's conquer. It's all this about." And it just means conquering the idea. Empty.
Okay, it means conquering the ideas of emptiness. Well, I think that we have this idea in our head of the warrior being warfaring, right? I mean, it's built into the word that a warrior is meant to go out to war. Is that the sense any of you get? I mean, Susan? Right. Right. So I think that was the sense that a lot of people associate that term with violence and death, kind of like Susan's saying. And as a veteran, if you guys didn't know that, I'm a veteran, and I know that there's some more out here. Hi, Dad. We tend to not think that they're all bad, right? That it's all bad. Not that warfaring is good, but there are some traits that can be associated with a warrior that might be beneficial. Can anybody think of any traits that a warrior might have that could be beneficial to a spiritual person? Doug? Courage and sacrifice. Okay, cool. What was it? Fortitude, dedication. Okay. Okay, inner strength. All right. Deb? Protective. Right. Jerry? One who conquers themselves. Oh, that's awesome.
They're vigilant.
Vigilant.
Perceptive.
Perceptive. What's that? Committed, right? They have discipline, training and discipline. So those are a lot of the things we're doing. So there is a term in Tibetan, pawo, which means one who is brave and works with rather than against challenges. The spiritual warrior is about being brave to face yourself, and from that bravery, have the confidence in yourself to face the challenges of the world. And I like this line, while helping others to lift their existence. So as spiritual warriors, we are helping others to lift their existence. Now, if we can lift it up all the way into enlightenment, that's really awesome. But whatever movement we can make is something. And so here's some terms that, or ways that Trungpa uses to describe it, or the path of the warrior. He says, the goal of warriorship is to reconnect with the nowness of reality so that you can go forward without destroying simplicity, without destroying your connection to the earth. The point of warriorship is to work personally with our situation now. The essence of warriorship, or the essence of human bravery, is refusing to give up on anyone or anything. The goal of warriorship is to express basic goodness in its most complete, fresh, and brilliant form. So these last 2 points, he talks about refusing to give up on anybody and expressing this basic goodness. So I want to stretch our brains here for a little bit. We're going to put the practice into effect. I'm going to talk about Jonathan Ross, who's 43. He's a committed patriot and a Christian who is known as a tremendous father and a tremendous husband. He was a gunner in the Iraq War. He's married to a Philippine immigrant. He worked at the border for many years, preventing drug trafficking into the United States. Do you like those guys that prevent drug trafficking into the United States? Is that a good thing? Yeah. He actually suffered a serious injury when one of these significant drug traffickers dragged him over 30 feet in his car. So he was dangling outside the car as the guy tried to get away. When I read this, I hear values of loyalty, commitment, protection, openness, desire to benefit others in healthy ways, right? These are all really good characteristics, aren't they? And then we have Renee Good, 37, known as a devoted wife and mother of 3. She was a Christian and a poet. It is said that kindness radiated out of her. She sparkled. She was made of sunshine. She believed there is kindness in the world and that we need to do everything we can to find it and nurture it where it needs to grow. Do you think you could say that Renee and Jonathan may have shared some values? I mean, loyalty, commitment, protection, openness, desire to benefit others. Had they known each other in different circumstances, they may have been friends. So an act, even if we don't like it, does not make a person bad, right? That's what we're saying, that we have to love them all. We have to look at all people as equally valuable, equally flawed, and equally lovable if we are going to be a spiritual warrior. I know I had an experience with this. I've shared this one time before when I was stationed in Germany. It was Christmas. I think I was about to get out of the army, so I was stoked. And this old German gentleman came to the front gate. So I was working the front gate. That's one of the jobs you get when you're about to get out. So I was working the front gate, and this old German gentleman came to the front gate with 2 big bags of groceries. And he didn't speak a lick of English, so we had to get an interpreter. And we couldn't let him in because we're guarding the front gate, right? There could be bombs in those bags. So we got an interpreter, and he explained that when he was 16 years old during World War II, he had the fortune well, first of all, he was drafted into the Nazi army, which he didn't like, wasn't something a 16-year-old wanted to do, right? Wasn't something he always looked forward to. But he got drafted, he had to go in, he didn't feel he had a choice. And almost immediately he was captured by the Americans. And he said that was the best thing that could have ever happened, right? And so every Christmas he would bring wine and cheese, and that's what was in those bags, wine and cheese and bread and all kinds of goodies to thank the Americans. And I feel like that made me feel so proud to be American, right? At that time, I felt very proud, because that's what I would want, that you don't look at your enemies as enemies. They're just like us, right? And that's what somebody did. Some Americans did that. And that's why this German felt the way that he did, right? He felt very close, or as if he owed something to America. So let's break it down. The Great Eastern Sun, rising and setting. So the way of the Great Eastern Sun is based on this idea that there's a natural source of radiance and brilliance in the world, which is the innate wakefulness of human beings. It's the sun of human dignity. So dignity comes up a lot in Trungpa. It's the sun of human power. It is the rising of human warriorship. It creates an atmosphere in which you can constantly move forward, recharging your energy. Interestingly enough, occasionally, and actually I was talking to Lama about this yesterday in Darshan, occasionally people are frightened by this vision of the Great Eastern Sun. But once you know your cowardness, once you know where the stumbling block is, you can climb over it. That's an interesting statement, huh? That people are afraid of the Great Eastern Sun. And that really it's about knowing where the fear lies within you. The spiritual warrior has a tender heart that invokes different types of fearlessness. First of all, fear has to be acknowledged. The genuine heart of sadness comes from feeling that your non-existent heart is full. You would like to spill your heart's blood, give your heart to others. For the warrior, this experience of a sad and tender heart is what gives birth to fearlessness. Real fearlessness is the product of tenderness. It comes from letting the world tickle your heart, your raw and beautiful heart. You are willing to open up without resistance or shyness and face the world. You are willing to share your heart with others. Tenderness contains an element of sadness, not of feeling sorry for yourself, but a natural situation of fullness. In order to be a good warrior, one has to feel this sad and tender heart. So already we're kind of getting a depiction of a completely different type of warrior than the iconic warrior, right? We have the discipline, we have the courage. The courage is much different though, isn't it? It isn't courage to go fight and kill or be killed. It's courage to do what? What do we have to do? What is courage here? Open your heart. And this is what scares people of the rising Eastern Sun. Why is that? What is so scary about opening your heart? Right. You become vulnerable. So I want to give an example, and this is coming from one of our Entering the Path classes with Zach and I did get permission to share this. We kind of get into pretty heavy discussion. So if you guys haven't gone and you really want to have a deep talk, show up. We get into some pretty heavy discussions sometimes. And I have a coaching background. So sometimes if I feel like somebody is willing to share more, but they won't, I'll like poke at them with coaching questions. Can you tell me more? You know, this type of thing. And we had a situation like that. We were talking kind of about this spiritual warrior and this idea of being open and fear. And this particular person shared that coming back from Vietnam, that he was so Can you pass the tissue? Sorry. He was so overcome with fear that he would hide in a corner in the fetal position, that he would sleep with the lights on. And he didn't want people to know that he was just riddled with fear all the time. Sorry. And so when the class was over and I was out in the parking lot talking with this person, he apologized for disclosing all of that information. And he said that he doesn't ever share that with anybody. And what I told him was, well, maybe you need to, because that's what we're talking about. That's overcoming that fear of sharing and getting real and opening your heart. You have to go there, right? And not be ashamed of it. This is just real. So I thought that was really an excellent example of both the things that stop us from opening our heart and the need to do it, right? That this is real. And I honestly think people need to know when you go to war and you're in combat, it's a big deal. It fucks people up, right? So even if they come back, they're still damaged. And you need to know that before you go in, right? And so you can avoid it as much as possible. And I think that's, for me, it's a multi-layered message, but it started with this person having the courage to open his heart. And I appreciate that he did. So that, to me, was a really good example of a spiritual warrior. The warrior accepts challenges. So for the warrior, every moment is a challenge to be genuine, and each challenge is delightful. When you let go properly, you can relax and enjoy the challenge. When the arrow of intellect is joined with the bow of skillful means, then the warrior is never tempted by the seductions of a sun-setting world. So again, there's this idea of stepping up to the challenge, recognizing your fear, and yet doing it anyways, right? It's not that you ignore it, it's that you recognize it, but you don't let it stop you. And stepping into the world without getting sucked in to the temptations that we'll talk about in a little bit of the sun setting in the east. So the spiritual warrior is also disciplined in their renunciation. So what does that mean? What the warrior renounces is anything in his experience that is a barrier between himself and others. In other words, renunciation is making yourself more available, more gentle, and more open to others. Warriorship is a continual journey. To be a warrior is to learn to be genuine in every moment of your life. That is the warrior's discipline. So our discipline is to make sure that we are being honest and genuine in each moment of our life. And I don't know about you guys, but the minute I step into my workplace, I feel like that's just gone to shit. Right? I mean, I can do it here, more or less. I mean, to the best of my ability, as far as I know, but there are some environments where I cannot be myself or they'll fire me, right? So it's difficult. It's difficult. The warrior who has accomplished true renunciation is completely naked and raw, without even skin or tissue. He has no room and no desire to manipulate situations. When I hear this, I think of those moments, and maybe you have them in your life too, where you just, a lot of times it's following trauma or tragedy or something that just grabs you, and you can't even fake being somebody else than what you are in that moment. And I imagine, like, even, in the Ukraine right now or in Gaza, there's some people that are so broken, they don't know how to be anything but exactly what they are in the moment. And while those are terrible situations to be in, there's something to be said about being in that position where you're completely honest, right? Completely open, not trying to game anything, not trying to fake anything, just being really honest and open. Then he goes on, he is able to quite fearlessly what he is. Paradoxically, the warrior finds herself more alone. Why would that be the case? Why are we more alone as we step more into this idea of being a spiritual warrior.
Most people are facing the setting western sun, so that you don't live behind you, turning towards the sun, the eastern sun. There's not as many people.
That's right. The majority is in the setting sun. We live in a setting sun culture, right? So we end up being lone warriors, right? Or yeah, right? Lone spiritual warriors, because the majority of the world is living in the other side. And it does require discipline, and it is difficult. That sort of reminded me, you may have heard this before, of a Zen story about Hakuin Ikako. I don't know if I say that right. Did I say that right, Susan? Hakuin Ikako? Anyways. Okay. So anyways, he was a monk. And I don't even, this was centuries ago. I don't remember how long. I could look it up, but I'll just paraphrase it. There was a young woman in their temple, in the temple of the Zen monk, who got pregnant. And she didn't want to tell her parents what was really going on. So she told them that the monk got her pregnant. So when the baby was born, they brought the baby to the monk, disparaged him, and said, "You created this problem, you fix it." His response was, "Is that so?" And he raised the baby. And people had opinions, they talked, they gossiped. And then finally the girl, after about a year, told her parents the truth. And so the parents came back and said, "Oh, sorry, we were wrong. Can we have the baby back?" And he said, "Is that so?" And he handed the child back. That was his only response all of the time. "Is that so?" He didn't defend himself. He didn't say it was a lie. He didn't do any of that. He just accepted whatever life gave him and went with it. And all the gossip and the stories, that's everyone else. That's their problem. That's discipline, right? I mean, I know I just went through some situations at my own work where there was similar stuff going on, and I don't know, man, I had a hard time saying, "Is that so?" I did what? It's tough. So when you aren't playing the games of mainstream culture, the setting sun that we're going to talk about, life is lonely. But this courage to live by your own rules becomes an example for others. The courage of a spiritual warrior emboldens the courage of others. So just by our mere example, we're creating more of us. Does that make sense? We don't even have to do a whole lot. Just by example of living in our truth and being genuine. There are some people that will see that and they will be moved away from the setting sun. I have to add that. I mean, I've always kind of considered myself a spiritual person, but nothing like what has happened in the 3.5 years that I've been here. So it makes a big difference when you're training with an army of like-minded spiritual warriors, as we are in this Sangha. It makes a big difference when you have a community of people who think the same way, feel the same way, and are going through the same struggles. And we're all very genuine, open, and raw. That helps. It's so much harder when you're alone trying to do it. So the spiritual warrior embodies a tender heart with fearlessness while avoiding aggression to conquer the world. She does this by using some of the same characteristics associated with purpose, dedication, discipline, attributed to other types of warriors. Her embodiment of warriorship is brave, genuine, authentic, loving, and open. And it sounds so easy, right? So it's funny, I went back and forth with Lama on the picture for the roar for this, and some of them were pretty hilarious. Some of the pictures I came, but I thought they were very creative, but they're sort of hilarious. So finally, I landed on the picture that you saw, which was the wind horse. It was, and I don't even know the story behind it, but Trungpa does talk about the wind energy and the wind horse. And that being a spiritual warrior is like trying to stay in the saddle of a horse. Anyone here ever go horseback riding? Yeah. It's like, I don't know, in my experience, I remember you really have to kind of grip the horse with your legs, right? You're not even really sitting, you're grabbing, right? So the idea that being a spiritual warrior is like riding a horse where you're going to jostle around, and sometimes you might fall off, or you'll get close, or you're pulling yourself back up, but it's constant work, and I don't know about you, but when I was done, like my legs were killing me. So it's like riding a horse, in that you have to expect that there's lots of bumps and jostles, and the idea is to have the discipline and the training to get yourself back on that saddle, right? That it doesn't mean it's always going to be an easy ride, but you stay in the saddle. Okay, so now we're going to talk about what stops us. The comfort of neurotic comfort, conformity, routine, the sun setting in the west. Funny how it's east and west. It's just the way the sun moves, right? The sun setting in the west is a life based on fear, consumerism, hopelessness, and the avoidance of basic goodness, characterized by a perpetual afternoon or eternal depression, where individuals feel a sense of impending darkness, seek distractions to avoid facing their own and the world's inherent insanity. It involves a lack of vision, a focus on endings, and a general sense of depression or irrational negativity, leading to a desire for a quick fix. And then he goes on to say, the way of cowardice is to embed ourselves in a cocoon in which we perpetuate our habitual patterns. When we are constantly recreating our basic patterns of behavior and thought, we never have to leap into fresh air or onto fresh ground. We prefer to hide in our personal jungles and caves. When we hide from the world in this way, we feel secure. We are attracted to our cocoons, our selfishness, and we are afraid of selflessness, stepping beyond ourselves. And then he also goes on to talk about the metaphor of the womb, right? That it's almost like we're trying to crawl back into the safety and comfort of our mother's womb to escape experiencing and dealing with what's happening in the world. So, none of us here are ready for saint, or maybe some of us Buddhahood, I don't know. But I know that I reach for certain things when I feel uncomfortable. I recognize that I do. I know that I'm trying to stay in the saddle while I do, right? And I try to forgive myself, but I'm human. It's a work for me. And I'm sure it is for you too. It's hard staying in the saddle. But I have to believe that I more or less am still there. I get jostled around. I'm not always going on a straight path, but I try to stay in the saddle. What is stopping you? What is the fear you have that prevents you from completely opening your heart and being genuine? What is your biggest challenge to being a spiritual warrior? Now I'm actually opening that up. That's not a rhetorical question. What is stopping you? Okay.
So historically, probably like everybody in this room, I've had heartbreak. And at the time, there was some point where I reached a point where I just shut it off. And so I didn't really deal with it. I just kind of like made it so it wasn't an issue. And so over the years, it's not that I don't know about love and compassion, but it's like I have like this deep-seated fear that has kept a place that is a blockage in a sense. And so just knowing that is a really great place to be, because something to work on,
Right.
But and just it's like for a long time I didn't really even know it was there. I thought it was just strong. It was not that.
The walls you built were strong.
Yeah. So that.
Yeah. And that, I don't think that's uncommon, you know, being open means being vulnerable. You risk being hurt. I imagine if you're a spiritual warrior, you just have to suck it up, get back on the horse. You do work through the fear, the hurt, you do work through that, but you don't build a wall. I think that's the difference.
Renunciation change.
Yeah, okay, cool. Anyone else? What stops you?
I can talk about how I've been. Well, in my life. And I am very afraid of what people think. And are they gonna like me? That was a huge driving force in my life. And I think it probably happened because of my relationship, especially with my not feeling love. Therefore, I needed everybody else to accept me. So I worked really hard to do the right thing and not ruffle feathers and try to do it all. Because if your own mother thinks you're not good enough, then you can't prove it to everyone else. You have to look at your heart. So that's how it was. So I would have difficulty opening myself up, open my heart because I can get hurt. You know, I can get abandoned. All of them. But I don't really feel that way anymore. That's changed. But I'm talking about that.
Right. So it sounds like, Susan, and tell me if I'm wrong, that you grew up feeling like love was conditional. Like you just had to be a good enough daughter and somehow earn it, right? That if you just did the right thing, you know, at the right time and the right way, then you might earn some love and respect. Right. Well, but you're always working for it. And then then you start to think going out into the world, I just got to do the right thing for the right people and then they'll love me. And that'll make you crazy because you know it doesn't work.
You know,
Right. That's a really great way to go about just letting go of this idea that if people choose to love you, great. They don't want to, that's okay too.
I know,
Right.
and I think,
Right.
and no,
Right.
you
That's right. Any other brave souls out there? What stops you?
know, I think, many of the writings come from the shading, you know, definitely an example of it, but many writings. It's presented as this opening and this development of bodhicitta and this ability to you know, this ability to connect. It's presented in this really dramatic, what I hear as a really dramatic, huge shift.
You know, and it doesn't work that way. And if you think that it's got to be something big and dramatic, then it's going to be very off-putting. But if you are trained and have community around that allows you to do little bit by little bit by little bit and gain confidence and surety and ability, become more skillful, little bit by little bit by little bit, then it's very much more doable. But if we present it as a really euphoric, big come to Jesus thing, you know.
Come to
it's-
Buddha.
Yeah, well, but you know, I mean, I'm thinking of the evangelical.
Right.
Right. It's extremely difficult, but if we could present it in a soft, humanistic, nurturing way, then it's much easier. So I think a lot of it just has to do with presentation and with acceptance.
Right. Start where you are.
Which is a great book by Pema Chodron.
I think one of the obstacles for me is that it requires effort. And in the beginning, I think I had sort of a mistaken view of that effort, that it was like this hard, kind of punitive, got to whip yourself into shape kind of thing, turn yourself into something else, make yourself a Buddha, that kind of thing. But it kind of strikes me that, especially with this sort of this metaphor of the suns, right, turning from the setting sun towards the rising sun, is that the effort is actually just one of pivoting. It's just a pivot, right? It's not a huge, it doesn't have to be this massive energy. That's what we're actually used to, right? Is putting a lot of effort into making things become something that we want. And that was the mistaken view that still actually lingers. But it turns out, I think, that the energy that's required is really just one of turning, you know, and that it's a lot softer and gentler than anything that I ever imagined.
So I'm wondering, Daniel, and correct me again if I'm wrong, but it sounds like you were sort of a little bit of attached to an image, an idea of how this was going to happen.
Yeah, for sure. I had all kinds of ideas, and so far none of them have been right.
So just pivot. That's all you got to do.
Just pivot. I think I'm not suggesting that that's the way. It's just the realization that I had is that I'm sort of lazy by nature, including in busyness, right? There's different forms of laziness, and that's sort of my cocoon. And for some reason, I thought that emerging from the cocoon would require a lot of this struggling, this pushing against, but it's not really like that. It doesn't take that.
Right.
It's steady, you know, methodical. You just keep doing it, and then it sort of works itself out.
It's training, right? That turns into skill. All right, so I'm going to try to wrap this up a little bit. It was funny when I was thinking about my own areas where I fall off the horse. They probably would have been the same places where Alex Preddy and Renee Good fell off, in that when I go to that dark, angry place, I can get in people's faces. So it's maintaining composure. And I've done really well. I mean, I'm much better than where I used to be. It's maintaining composure in these heightened states, right? So that's where some of my struggle lies. And right now, I mean, where it happens in my life mostly is with regards to my son, who has learning disabilities. And, you know, I always see people trying to take advantage of him. So then I don't want to step in and be the mom, and because he's an adult and he's adulting, right? But I know that he comes from a disadvantage. So that's where I struggle with that. All right. So things are changing in the world, and the change is not going away, right? It's going to continue. We need to stay together and ensure that we stay seated in the saddle. So Trungpa says, and this line caught me because it reminded me of a slogan that I hear frequently, and sometimes I see it on hats. When corruption enters a culture, it ceases to be now. It becomes past and future. When corruption enters a culture, it ceases to be now. It becomes past and future. The sunsetting mentality. Essentially, this is where we are. We live in the sunsetting of the West. We strive for more of nothing at the cost of all earthly existence. We are lost. Well, the focus of this talk, well, it's not the focus of this talk. It sets up the stage for the difficulty for us of being spiritual warriors in modern times, that we are living, we're trying to be something completely different than everything around us. And that's what makes it difficult. We have to be distinct, different, disciplined, open, generous, loving, empathetic, brave, dignified, in a sunsetting culture that celebrates the opposite behavior and values. And then I think of all the people who've been successful doing that in the past. I mean, you know, we can go back to ancient history, or we can look at more modern history. Yes?
Thank you. Oh, so I apologize if I'm out of order, but when you mentioned Pretty and Good about being falling off their saddle, so I just wanted to say it raised my heartbeat. Just it felt I'm not sure of the right word, but it didn't feel good, and so I was hoping for a clarification.
I have a tendency, like them, to get very involved, right? So I think in those cases, even if, I mean, I feel like them, I guess that's what I'm saying. I feel like them. But whether that's the best way to go about as a spiritual warrior, I'm not sure, right? Because the idea is that we are trying to keep the peace. We're trying to work with the situation. I find it most challenging, just like they did in those situations. That's what I'm saying. I find it most challenging when you're seeing people get hurt. I find it most challenging, especially when you know those people and love those people. I find it most challenging not to just cave to my instincts, to just fight. That's when it becomes the most challenging for me. Does that make sense?
No, not really, because the person, there was, you know, they were killed.
I know.
To mention, or to not mention the, because you have two sides in a sense, right? Those standing against ICE and those being ICE. And so to not say anything about the murderers, it just seemed like there was something missing. But here's how I feel too, is that maybe it's just something for me, you know, it's my inner self that needs to calm down after I heard that, but I still feel very bothered.
Well,
But
and
that's
it
just
is,
me.
we're talking about being different I mean, it was the spiritual warrior in modern times, right? Our modern times are disturbing. Similar to times in the past when people, I don't know, there's some hippies in here that protested during Vietnam, right? These times are disturbing. But remember, I started off talking about, as a spiritual warrior, we're supposed to have compassion for all sentient beings. So that means we also have to have compassion for what you just called the murderers. And I started off the very beginning talking about one of them, which was Jonathan Ross, right? So that's where it's difficult. And I think what you're finding is that the same difficulty that I have. I think that you're feeling the same difficulty that I have. It's hard not to get angry. It's hard not to respond to that anger. It's hard to have compassion for people that are pissing you the hell off, right? And they're doing terrible things. But we have to remember they are sentient beings. They have a Buddha nature. They're making poor choices, even if they're really poor choices. We have to remember that. That's what makes being a spiritual warrior hard. And that's what I'm saying. That's where I struggle. So it sounds to me like you're struggling in the same place.
Thank you.
So I actually kind of heard that different because I think there's an aspect of being a spiritual warrior where we can have compassion for all beings. But there's another aspect that's very honest about justice. And if there can be no peace without justice. So if we start looking at like all situations as just needing some sort of compassion for people's actions that don't include systematic and personal responsibility, then I think in a certain way we are leaving spiritual warriorship. And I don't think that has to do with anger. I think that can come from a very measured place. But I think speaking out against injustice is really an important part of that, and trying to make those things equal actually disrupts any sort of equity we can have.
So I don't know that thank you for that. I don't know that I feel like we're making it equal, in that I feel like part of my practice, and maybe part of the practices of some of the people here, is I have to not pigeonhole the people who have bad behavior. And it isn't that I'm condoning it, or I think that I have to have compassion for them because they're, even when their behavior is bad, I also think that they still need to be held accountable. But I have to not hate them as a spiritual warrior, right? I have to know that this is wrong, and I have to know that they need to be held accountable. But if I start pigeonholing them, then I'm feeding into the game. Hi, Eli. Do you guys want to keep talking? Because we're going over now.
I did also actually, I don't know, Eli's not mic'd, but I wanted to thank everyone for all the disruption with tech. We are like running through to try to make sure that Jada Rinpoche's talk will
Right.
go well next week. And so we're ironing out a lot of bugs, and we're also running the system in the dojo and back on Zoom for the first time in quite a while. So thank you so much. I know this has been problematic, but we've gotten a lot done, and I think that it's looking really good for next week. So thanks for helping us.
Thanks, Becky.
Okay. So should we wrap this up, or is there a couple more comments?
Jack has a comment.
Okay.
Sure. So Jack says, just think it's important to note that people are getting gassed and assaulted even when they're just marching. Ready and Good, we're trying to intervene in something very harmful and violent happening. Sometimes confrontation is necessary. Legality is not justice. We can have compassion while trying to stop harm. So just kind of echoing. Yeah.
And the irony is too, thank you for that, Jack. And you made me think of when I was putting this together. So I think it was when I was finishing it up Friday night, I did like a marathon of Holocaust movies with my son. And I just thought, what would I do? What would I do? And so I'm right there with you. I'm right there with you. And I think you guys, we're like-minded, but this is also where we're going to struggle, in that we can't start pigeonholing people and give up on them. Remember, I started with that. We can't give up. Even when we don't like the behavior, we think it's really awful. You know, we can start to say, you're evil, they're evil. And then we're playing into the problem, right? So that's what I'm saying. That's where I struggle. And I kind of think maybe some of y'all are struggling there too. All right. But yes, I hear you. Yes, Dylan?
Well, this might be an off the wall kind of practice, but we do have Tonglen
Mhm.
as a spiritual practice. So I know it's an interesting way to put it, but if we're trying to increase our Buddha nature and, others' Buddhist natures, why don't we practice Tonglen for the murderers? Because if they're surrounded by darkness, surrounded by hate, could that be an unconventional way of
Yeah.
fighting instead of going to protest and getting gassed, or speaking up in the material world?
Right. Yeah, I'd say, yeah, Tonglen is a good way to go. I don't have the answers. I only recognize where I have vulnerabilities myself on the path. All right, so let's so I'm just going to wrap it all up here. We are warriors and we really are fighting a war. And that's it.